right, guys, welcome. It's week 5.
Hi.
This is Coach Anna, Jamie, Steve, and this week it's all about carbohydrates, everybody's fear-inducing food.
Thanks, Dr. Atkins.
So you've been learning about what is a carb and what is, more importantly, what is a smart carb, which is what we really promote, and what your body, how it uses it, why it needs it, all those such things. So a smart carb is obviously the whole food, which means a one ingredient carb. Normally, whenever people start thinking of carbs, they think of like, oh, bread, pasta, like that kind of stuff. Well, that's not necessarily a one ingredient carb or a smart carb like we're talking about. We think, if you can get your carbs from, potatoes, rice, things that came from the ground, any kind of plant is a carb. They just vary in, density of carbs. So if you want to look at it this way, the more water a plant has in it, so your leafy greens, anything like that, those are less dense, and the drier, so like root veggies, bananas, potatoes, rice, like that kind of stuff, the drier the plant is, the more dense the carb is. So that would be like a smaller portion, I guess.
Correct.
So anyway, you can go back to those lessons and kind of look at some examples of what we put in as smart carbs and try to add those into your meals. But like I said, a lot of people start getting into that area of where they start thinking of carbs as bad or that they need to seriously limit them. Yes, there are certain carbs that you probably should limit, like processed carbs or, majorly processed breads or something like that, because the key there is the word processed. Now, a sweet potato is not going to act the same way in your body as, say, a piece of white bread. Because the white bread is more processed, your body doesn't have to work as hard to break it down, and it doesn't have to use as much energy to get that food digested. So that's why the whole foods are better in a way, that you have to actually use more energy to digest it. Who's saying that carbs equal yum? Yes, they do. But so if you want to think about it that way, you can eat your serving of a potato or whatever it is, even though it says in MyFitnessPal, 30 grams of carbohydrates. You shouldn't freak out about that, because there's fiber, there's loads of vitamins, and it's going to take your body more time and more energy to digest a sweet potato than it would be
Crackers.
Slice of bread,
Slice
whatever.
bread.
Yeah, donut.
And even like with
Donut.
when you have the stuff that says whole wheat on the back,
Yeah.
but the first thing it says enriched whole wheat.
Yeah.
It means they stripped down the whole wheat,
Yep.
made it into a cheaper version, and then added in some cheap vitamins and minerals of their own, and made it absolutely crappy. So that's where some of those things get a little confusing on the carb front, where you're like, yeah, but it's whole wheat or it's whole grain, but you have to really look at those ingredients on the back. That's why, like what you're saying, sticking with a whole food, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, a one ingredient carb, you can't go wrong. That is completely safe. Now, there are gray area foods, and I think we may be talking about gray area foods tomorrow in your lesson.
I think I saw it today, actually.
Today?
Yeah.
Okay, good deal. Gray area foods we look at them in two different perspectives. We have what we call bridging the gap foods. Now, those are foods that are, not necessarily the best version, but they're not going to make or break your progress if you don't abuse them. So, for example, one of my gray area foods is my waffle with the Smuckers.
Mm-hmm.
The low sugar jam. Now, that is not something that is what I consider a healthy nutrition
or habit-filling food.
Or a habit-filling food. It's just something that
You want.
I want it, and I'm going to eat a little bit of it. It is a carb, and it's not necessarily going to kill my progress or anything like that. I mean, do y'all have any of your gray area foods that you like but don't necessarily think of them as habit filling,
I would say definitely the gluten-free waffles are mine as well.
Yeah.
I have them every morning, and I'm not scared to eat them.
Yeah. And that's not necessarily that it's a bad food, but that technically, if we wanted to be super good, we would eat like sweet potatoes instead of our waffles.
My gray area food would probably be a sandwich of some sort.
Yeah. So a wheat bread.
The whole wheat
Yeah.
sandwich.
Yeah. There's always there's varying levels of the carb continuum, I guess you could say. You know, there's whole food ones, whole food carbs, and then there's the kind of middle of the road ones that are not necessarily bad, but they're not like the best things, and it's not something that you want to necessarily eat, every meal. Okay? So that's kind of where we're getting at as bridging the gap. So if it helps you move along to a better choice eventually, kind of like how in our water habit we said if you're not used to drinking just plain water, you can like start flavoring it with stuff. That's kind of the same way you can think
like
of
additive.
Yeah, like wraps or something like that, like sandwich wraps, for example. People love sandwiches. Maybe they're used to eating it on like, some kind of sub sandwich. Well, bridging the gap would be like, hey, let's use a whole wheat wrap. I'm going to put some plants in it. I'm going to put some lean meats in it. It's going to help you add in a whole lot of good. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's a perfect way to word it.
Yeah. That's a good bridging the gap food and a good level 1 type of eating habit. The other gray area food is what I call when clients are reaching
For
to
old habits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Fulfilling, yes.
Fulfill the crack craving.
Right. Have you what would you say is like your number one, like seeing from clients, gray area reaching food,
Like veggie chips or some form of like cracker crunch. They want to satisfy that crunching habit.
Yep. Salty and crunchy.
Yep.
That's the number one.
Yeah. And then I would say probably healthy versions of a dessert.
Protein balls.
Yes, protein balls, yes. So a lot of those things can start popping up in your, food journal or your everyday, and you're not realizing that it could be just the same amount of calories or sugar or whatever it is as, say, like protein balls versus Reese's peanut butter cups or a Snickers
That's like
bar.
Your whole Bubble Busted campaign where you run like the Devil's Food Smart or Devil's Food Cookie or whatever it was that Weight
the
Watchers had out
Oreo. We just
versus
did
an
the
Oreo.
Yeah.
They're exactly the same. Now, like those are both big food companies or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my opinion, both of those options are crappy. Mm-hmm. But like even like some of the bars that are out there, like your Quest bar, not Quest bar, but Cliff Bar.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast just the other day, and you're like, man, it's whole, like oat flour is the first ingredient, and the second ingredient is tapioca syrup, which is what? Sugar. And so you're like, I'm making a great choice. Oh, wait, I'm not, because it's loaded in sugar.
Yeah.
So that's what, sometimes like what you're saying, even though my energy ball that I'm buying has dates and almonds and this and that, when you look at all those ingredients and you add them up, you're like, holy hand grenade, that's worth 5 strips of bacon equals the same amount of fat that's in this energy ball.
Yeah.
Well, and another thing is that the volume of it. Yeah. You can't eat a lot of those things.
Small portions.
So,
you're gonna eat one. Once you pop, you can't stop. Like those things are serious. Like you don't have one, you're like, oh, it was this big, I'll have another. Oh, it's this, I'll have 3. And you had 400 calories right before you went to bed.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you have stuff that kind of mirrors those gray area foods, like ask yourself, are you feeding a habit, a new habit that you're trying to work on, or are you feeding an old habit? I'm not saying that it's easy to kick those sweet cravings. I mean, Cookie Monster over here, like, you all are...
In moderation.
In moderation, yes, of course. But I'm just saying, like, you're going to have those cravings. You just get a little bit better at, or a little bit more better at dealing with them and telling yourself or justifying your reasons for not doing it. Your reasons change for not eating it. You want to feel better, or you want to perform better in your workouts. And that's going to take us to the next point is, having said like all this information about carbs, and there's gray area carbs, and then there's whole ingredient carbs that are better for you, when you become like start working out regularly and you still have a fear of carbohydrates, or maybe you have lost a bunch of weight by going low carb, and you have that positive kind of reinforcement of, oh, I didn't eat any, carbs at all, and I lost 20 pounds in however many weeks. Like, you have that in your head, and it's stuck in your head that works for you, but that doesn't work for everyone. Mm-hmm. And especially if you are of the more active population. Technically, yes, you can live without ingesting a whole lot of carbohydrates. It's really hard not to ingest carbohydrates, especially if you eat plants. And remember, guys, your plants are your vitamins, so it's kind of like you're never gonna not eat carbohydrates. But if you are active, your body's gonna need those things. And we're coaches at Versus, so we see people all the time coming into a workout, they're dragging,
no energy,
and sometimes that can be part of rest, but also just not enough energy. Yeah. I mean, so Anna, she's trained for multiple figure shows.
Yeah.
And carbohydrates are like a main thing that what you ate while you were training.
Oh yeah, even toward like the very end. I mean, Steve can witness. I was eating dry, regular potatoes and rice cakes, and I mean, you need that energy.
Put butter and cheese and sour cream on your tater?
No, none of that. But without those carbs, I didn't have any energy. And even like days in here, if I have a low carb day, I feel it in my performance. Like, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and that's like, so if you look at like kind of the journey of a client that comes in here to Versus, but also kind of through Clean Kitchen. So like if you have somebody that sees this initially, and let's say that their goal is weight loss, the first thing that we start looking at is like kind of the amount of all the foods that they're eating, like, protein, carbohydrates, and fat. And for those of you that we may have skipped over this or you didn't read this lesson, like those are your macronutrients: protein, carbohydrate, and fat. And you have micronutrients, and we look at those big three. And so when they first come in, we're like, hey, let's try to limit the like crappy carbohydrates that they're getting, and try to shift them into a really clean source of carbohydrate. And so if we do that, what do we see? Weight loss.
Yeah.
The weight loss starts happening like pretty soon. And let's say that then you shift over. Let's say Anna was our client. She came in, she was 30 or 40 pounds overweight. We would do that first, limit the carbohydrate intake, and switch it over to a good version. And then when she gets down to like, man, I'm 120 pounds, I'm a Lamborghini, I'm ready to rip, roar, and tear this track up out here and run fast and lift heavy weights and all that, heck yeah, we're going to reintroduce some carbs, because that's her fuel. And then that's where I think Jamie's waffle and the sugar-free jam or whatever comes in. Normally, when I see her post that or be like, yeah, I had one of those, it was freaking awesome, was after a leg day. Massive muscle group in the body, glutes, hams, and calves and quads, which is, over 50% of the muscle makeup in your body, and it requires energy. So you can get away with eating that type of carbohydrate because you're going to be burning it as fuel, as opposed to someone that is still trying to lose 50 to 60 pounds or whatever. They can't get away with that as well as your body would be able to process that.
There are phases.
Correct.
I will say there are phases in how we've talked about how your nutrition is going to be ever evolving. So if you have 30, 50 pounds to lose, you can get away with going low carb, okay, for a time, but not forever.
I don't think it's sustainable. Most of the stuff, like, and this is not knocking keto. Like, I think keto's great. But for sustainability and long term, I don't think it's maintainable because it's just too dang strict.
Yeah. And you can look at it this way. If you have more weight on your body, you have energy stores that need to be burned. Okay? So, you're probably not going to feel the best in, say, a workout as you're using up those fat stores and your body's, it's metabolically changing its way of burning some energy. But as you get leaner, as you get fitter, your body is not necessarily going to use it. It's not going to work that way. It doesn't have as much energy stored to use and to help your body perform and grow and build and recover. Carbohydrates are your muscle's fuel source. It's your body's number one fuel source. And I'm speaking specifically about glucose. And we have a lesson talking all about that glucose versus fructose. Glucose is more your starchy vegetables, like root veggies, grains, and stuff like that, and then fructose is more of your fruit. Neither is bad, but in the performance world, like if you are an athlete trying to improve strength, speed, any of those things, and recover from your workouts, glucose is going to be where you want to use most of your carb credits or your carb servings, because your body's going to process it easier. It doesn't necessarily have to go through your liver like fructose would, and it's not going to be stored as fat as easily. It's going to be your first energy source to be used, and then it's going to go to your muscles, as long as you're not overeating bowls of potatoes.
That's why what she's talking about, about the glucose. The glucose is again, rocket fuel for the athlete,
right?
Because it can be converted into muscle glycogen very quickly for energy. Okay, now that's a super important point, because again, going back to our client that's just coming in the door and is wanting to lose a lot of weight, should they eat tons and tons, like you just said, tons and tons and tons of glucose, which is coming from your crazy carbohydrate sources or whatever? Not necessarily. If weight loss is their goal. Because Michael has this story. He was running an ultra marathon, 30-something miles. He forgot to eat some jelly beans on one of his laps around, and immediately his body crashed. He almost cramped and almost passed out. They gave him some flat Coke and some jelly beans, and guess what? Whoop! Took right back off. So I'm like, dude, that stuff is so powerful. Don't abuse it in your normal diet day to day.
Yeah.
That's why the whole foods approach is so important.
Yeah, and if you have any questions about, how much carbohydrates should you be eating? If you're a level 1 client, you're just trying to feel good, you can eat carbs, stick to your portion sizes. That's level 1 type of eating. You should never feel afraid to eat some kind of smart carb, okay? And you can have that in pretty much every meal if you're a level 1 and your goal is just to feel good. Now, if you have a stricter goal of losing a particular amount of weight, or if you are already an active person, we're talking about level 2 type of habits. And later on, I think it's in week 8 or 9, we talk about carb timing
and carb cycling.
Carb cycling. That's a level 2 type of thing. But if you have any questions about that, reach out to your coach. That's what we're here for. We want to create an environment where you feel safe to ask those questions and not fearful to eat a food.
Yeah.
A lot of people, it's another thing that people get misunderstood. If they've been chronically eating low carb for a really long time and they start adding in some, they'll start to feel fluffy. They say fluffy.
Yes.
And really, if you understand what the carbohydrate is, listen to the word carbohydrate. It is letting your tissues fill up with water and hold on to water. So it's filling your muscles up. So if you're a figure competitor, if you go low carb for say a couple of days, your muscles may feel flat. And then as soon as you do a high carb day, the next day you're jacked, look like you just did a set,
That's
of a whole workout.
White wine or the rice cake before you walk on stage.
Right.
You do that with Anna and say, hey, eat one of those boogers.
Or
fill
jelly
the muscles up with sugar, and then they grab some water, and it makes her look fuller.
Yeah. So those are all level 2, level 3-esque type of points. But again, I want to reiterate that there's no reason to be afraid to eat carbohydrates, because they are your main energy source. So if you're feeling really lethargic or just groggy and you've been eating low starchy type of meals where you're only eating greens and protein, add a sweet potato in there. I guarantee you, you do your little handful size of rice or whatever it is, you'll definitely start feeling better immediately.
Especially in your performance as well.
Yeah, in the workouts, especially if you're a regular exerciser. So we're about right there. So if anybody has any last little thingies, we will cut it off right now. That was
We can talk about this for
oh, I know.
Oh, carbs.
I know.
Yeah.
Carbs, that's a never-ending, topic. So continue the topic with your coach or on the Facebook page. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions about it. It's nothing that you need to get super technical with, and don't overthink it. Just think one ingredient's best. There is some gray area. Just don't make the gray area a habit.
Exactly.
Okay? All right. We'll see y'all next week for week 6.
Bye, guys.
Bye.